Blog Talk Radio.
Live from Washington, D.C., it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio. QLPOR, as it's widely known, features a bevy of poets, spoken word artists, and live poetry readings with best-selling authors. Your host is Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Hello, everyone. This evening, for your quintessential listening poetry pleasure, I am very pleased to welcome noted poet Kim Parsons to the podcast. Kim's work has appeared in many journals and anthologies. Recently, Terrapin Press published her first collection, The Mayapple Forest. Having read the book, I found it to be quite exquisite. The poems are lyrical and thoughtful. The imagery is gorgeous, and it's moving as well as calming. To me, it felt as if the book had been written by an old soul, and that touched me. So I'd like to welcome you, Kim, to the program. Hello.
Thank you so much, Michael. I'm so thrilled for the opportunity to talk with you on your fantastic program. I'm such a fan and just so amazed by what you've given to poets and poetry through this program. Thank you.
Well, as I shared with Kim is my 300th guest tonight.
Wow.
And that makes the program that much more special. Let's begin this journey, Kim. Are you ready?
I am ready, yes. Always ready for poetry.
Forest. Yes. Tell me about the Mayapple Forest in terms of what inspired you.
Well, Michael, I have so much gratitude for Terrapin Books and Diane Lockwood, the publisher, for believing in the book and helping it to come into the world. It was a long time coming. I began my studies as a student of poetry, in my 20s, actually even earlier than that, in high school. And I thought that I was going to pursue a career as a professor of poetry and writing and literature and be publishing throughout my life. And life kind of led me other places, and I turned to writing more for myself, privately, for family, for friends, for loved ones, and kind of left the creative writing publishing scene for the middle period of my life. And now here I am. I've come back to it. I'm retired from teaching and working in education, and I am so grateful that I'm in a place in my life where I can give lots of time to writing poetry, being in poetic community with folks like yourself, and through organizations like Cultivating Voices LIVE Poetry. And
yes.
About a little bit less than a year ago, I was ready to send my manuscript out, and I was very, very pleased and gratified and just amazed that it was scooped up and now out in the world. So
wow.
that's a really gratifying thing. And so it's my first book, but I hope not my last. I'm, already working on new stuff. The book is really about many things. Everything is interwoven with my love of nature and my inspiration from the natural world. The way that it fills my senses and stirs my imagination, is evident pretty much in most of the poems. But I explore themes of grief, love, what is the meaning of life? How do we, how can we be, how can we make sense of the hurts in life and heal from them and forgive and carry on? So the book, in a way, I want it to feel, I want it to feel like someone is taking a journey into a rich, deep, beautiful place.
Wow.
When they
Very
read
nice.
it. And I think the title refers to an actual, real, natural forest, but I think that it also is a metaphor for me of, getting lost in the natural world and in the beauty of language and in your imagination.
So the Mayapple Forest is real.
Oh, yes. Mayapples are just a gorgeous plant that are native to the eastern United States, and you find them in the woods. They grow in colonies close to the ground. They grow from one root and spread from one root, and they grow very low to the ground, maybe as high as most people's ankles or shins. They appear from the forest floor in the spring and open up their leaves, and by May they have a beautiful white bloom on the female plants. And that image of the flowering plant is depicted on the cover of the book. Yes. And by the midsummer there are individual fruits where there were blossoms that come to ripeness. And the really amazing thing about this plant is that the entire plant, from roots to the tips of the leaves, is poisonous, except for the juice of the absolutely perfectly ripe fruit. And there's something about the image of that fascinates me. The sweetness and the danger go hand in hand in life. You know what I mean?
Yes, so true.
And also that idea of, pain and joy, grief and love, these things go hand in hand in our lives. And so the plant becomes, I think, a metaphor for that also in a couple of the poems. Yeah, so it's a real place. I mean, I can actually walk in the woods and see them in the spring.
Really? So, wow.
Yeah.
Well, next time you're in the woods, take a picture and send it to me. All right?
Yes, I will.
I've never heard of that
I
before.
will.
Now, in terms of the structure of the book, how is it structured content-wise? Chapters? The editor wanted to kind of braid together throughout the book, and I think it's an interesting way to do it, the different themes. So it's not like all the poems about love are in one section. It's not like that. It's like there are many threads in the book, and they're woven throughout the whole book. I hope that by the end of the book, there's a sense of having come to some deeper wisdom about life and one's place in the world, and to an acceptance of the pain we go through, and a choice to continue to love in spite of it all, and to move forward. So I think, if I hoped someone were to get an overarching theme, I think that would be pretty close to it. The reason I asked that question is that when I read the book, it was so seamless that I didn't think about chapters or the structure. So I'm asking now because I didn't think about it.
That's great. I mean, I hope that it has an easy flow and that it moves up and down and in and out of emotions and life experiences, and that they're all connected. I mean, that's what our lives are, right? You know, one day you're up and one day you're down, and one day you're flooded with memories and one day you're filled with plans for the future, you know? I mean, that's life. Mm-hmm. So I hope that it has that kind of a flow to it, and I'm glad to hear it did for you.
Yes, it did. So what do you think you learned about yourself writing this book? Who are you as a consequence of writing this book?
Gosh, you know, so much of writing is learning. Mm-hmm. So much of writing is learning. I think the best writing is the writing that teaches you the most, you know. You start off thinking you know what you're going to write about, but I think if it's a really good poem, mm-hmm. it leads you to ahas and discoveries, you know, and depths or heights or questions or answers you didn't know were inside of you. Mm-hmm. Yes. And so that was just cemented for me as I worked on individual poems and then looked for ways that the poems connected and thought about how they related to each other. That whole idea that writing is discovery and learning, you know, a learning process when it's really working, that was just cemented for me through the experience. The other thing I learned about myself was, you know, I absolutely want to write poetry, even if it never ends up in a magazine or a journal or an anthology or a collection. I want to work on poetry. I want to share poetry with others, listen to their poetry. I want to be immersed in it. And it just made me want to do it even more. You know, so it's like what a joy to get to follow your passion, you know.
Yes, very much so.
It's just,
you know,
such a joy.
Well, let's say that we're outside Barnes & Noble and there's 1,000 people in line waiting to buy your book. And I hope they have you. Buy the book, everybody. If you had to advise readers prior to reading the book, what would you tell them? How would you advise them? What should they look for?
Do you mean in the sense of like what to bring to the book themselves?
No.
Is that what you mean?
No, actually no. What would you say to them that they will receive as a consequence of reading the book? Why should they read it? That's a better question.
You know, I really feel that poetry is sacred.
Okay.
I feel that it is an exploration of the sacred. And I say that because I feel that life is sacred. And so I feel like anytime you allow yourself to slow down and focus the way a poem can do, it's like a kind of prayer. And I actually, I'm not meaning attached to any particular religious tradition. I mean in the broadest sense of the word. Poetry is a chance to go deeper, to reflect, to open your heart, to connect one human to another, with your own self, you know, with humanity in general. And that to me is sort of a sacred activity. And so I would hope that anyone who picked up the book would feel invited into a quiet space of reflection and open-heartedness and, you know, hopefully would enjoy the journey and be moved by the journey and moved to reflect on their own life, you know, to open up their own heart in their own life.
So important. You know, I'm nervous right now because I'm so ready to hear your voice.
Oh.
And my anxiety is growing because I'm waiting with bated breath to hear.
Would you like to hear some poems?
Yes, please do.
Well, I wasn't originally going to open with this poem, but since we talked about the Mayapple plants, I think I will begin with a little poem. Comes later in the book, but it's a kind of a welcome into this space in a way, based on what you and I have just talked about. It's called Forest Salutation. And this poem is kind of pretending to be like a set of directions for a yoga exercise. A kind of, I don't know if you are familiar with, but in yoga there is a series of moves called sun salutation. And it's meant to kind of awaken your energy and spread it around your body. And I thought about that idea and the way I feel when I walk in the woods by myself and it's quiet and I can hear the birds and I can hear the leaves rustling under my feet and the stream gurgling in the background, and it feels like such a sacred space to me. And so this poem invites the listener to be in that space in a mindful way. Forest Salutation. Plant yourself ankle deep in a vernal pool of Mayapples. Arch your neck back and stretch. Sightline to the greening tips of poplars, reaching, kneel. Lift waxy veils to reveal singular blossoms. Adjust your vision to the flowers. Breathe in their glowing light. Repeat. That's Forest Salutation. I have quite a lot of poems that focus on memory and go back into memory because my heart is drawn to remember or because I'm trying to puzzle something out, or a memory just keeps coming back and sort of knocking at, my consciousness again and again, sticking in my mind. This poem I'll read next is about it's about as an adult looking back and recalling a moment of just the kind of unadulterated joy you could sometimes experience as a child, and which is much harder as we get older and life gets more complicated. And so the adult is looking back and thinking about the joy of an experience, and it's called Cool Glass of Water. This poem, before I begin, I'll say, this poem takes place in the kitchen of my childhood. I have quite a few poems that take place there. Kitchens seem to be centers of gravity for me, my mother, my sisters, my family, for many families. I'm not the first person to write about that, but I'll read a couple of poems probably with you tonight that take place in the kitchen. Cool Glass of Water. A blizzard of fuchsia speckles all down my shirt and Mama's apron. Rivulets of sweat down the left side of her face and my legs stuck to the cracked vinyl seat, the kitchen getting hotter by the minute. but we're grinning like damned fools over 8-pint jars of wineberry jam, made from the berries we picked together while ticks and poison ivy inched up our trousers, and we sang, "She's coming round the mountain," and who knows what all at the top of our lungs, hoping to scare away the snakes. I am 10, and I am spading up the last gobs from the kettle with the wooden spoon, and I am in love with her. And if I could, I would drink that memory like a cool glass of water every day of my life. That was Cool Glass of Water about my dear mama. The book is dedicated to my mother, Ouida Jeanette Ports. She died a few years ago and had a long and very full life. She was a hero to me. She was a best friend to me. She was a fantastic, generous, loving person. And she features in a lot of the poems in the book. The book opens with a poem about me kind of, I don't know any other way to say it, the day-to-day facing of the grief when you lose someone you love, someone you're very close with. And, you know, she believed you get up every day and you get on with it. And she taught us that kind of, you know, she was a role model for that. And so this poem is about that, too. It's called This Kind of Rainfall. This kind of rainfall. Rain after rain. Sun after rain. The mountain throws its scarf of mist across the valley. Rivulets form, disperse, reform, disperse again. Bittersweet quietly takes over the hedgerow. You there? You there? A bob white gently repeats his question. They say this kind of rainfall, day after day, inch after inch, comes once in 100 years. On the garden fence, cucumbers demonstrate the declarative, gold trumpets blaring. Determination, my mother taught me. The way rock is sanded down by water, the hose handle worn smooth. Keep going. Hat, boots, and gloves wait by the door. Clouds line up at the exit. I'm here. I'm here. The constant, silent ticking of her absence. And that poem was called This Kind of Rainfall, and I should say that it references the song of the bobwhite, which is, let me see if I can whistle it. It's a 2-note song that is very distinctive. Bob White, Bob White. And it's something that I hear sometimes when I'm out working in my garden, and it really made me feel like it was, you know, kind of talking to me one day, and it sort of inspired that poem. So that's a few to get us started, Michael.
All right, thank you. Would you share with me the titles of those poems again?
Yes, I read for you I read for you Forest Salutation,
Mm-hmm.
Cool Glass of Water,
Mm-hmm.
What else did I read for you? This Kind of Rainfall.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's as far as I got.
All right. In terms of titling those poems, was that a difficult process?
Oh, titling is
yes.
so much fun.
Oh, really?
Titling is so much fun. Titling is almost like a little, a title of a poem for me is almost like a little poem, Like there's something sort of magical when it clicks. It's just the greatest feeling, It's. I play around with titles a good bit, and they don't always come to me right away. I work at them. And I really enjoy that process because I feel like, how I talked earlier about writing is a learning for me,
yes.
And I feel like sometimes the title is a linchpin. In This Kind of Rainfall, the obvious parallel is, we cry when we're grieving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the year my mother passed away, she passed away in March. That year, we had more than double our annual rainfall, literally. And, you can't help but look at it day after day after day and think about it, right? What's it like, when it's just raining and raining? And, there's so many songs and poems and literature which use that theme. It's as old as humans, right? Looking out at the rain and feeling that connection to sadness or grieving or the flow of life or whatever. So, titles are really fun. They're another way to try to learn what the poem is telling you, I think.
Yes, very much so. Fun question here. Do you feel that a poem tells you what it wants to be?
I really think it does. And you have to be, sometimes it's ready to just spit it out at you, like immediately. That's rare and exciting and wonderful, right? When,
yes.
maybe it's been kind of brewing inside of you and it just all comes out and there's not that much to work on. But there are poems that, I work on for years. Mm-hmm. Years. The title poem of this book I worked on for years because it was a really difficult and painful topic for me. And some of these poems, I started many years ago and tucked them away. And, I had kind of left my public poet life behind. And in the last 5 years or so, I've been taking my work out and looking at it and typing it up and seeing if it had anything else to say or if it wanted to, go, if I wanted to go further with it. And it's almost like there's some sort of unconscious process, I think, in some poems where you just have to give yourself the time to discover what it is you want to say.
As I was listening, the one poem that really gave me chills, and it gave me chills before, Cool Glass of Water.
I know you've written about your own mama's importance to you and your own grieving.
Yes, that's true.
Can you think of a more powerful space than being in your mama's kitchen when you're a child and helping her to make something delicious? And she lets you lick the spoon and she's singing songs with you. My goodness. And the joy and love you feel as a child, And so how we wish we could live that every day in our lives now.
Oh, very much so. So if you had to, tie that up in a bowl, what is the purpose of that particular poem?
Well, I think someone much wiser than me, because I remember learning this back in my master's degree program at the University of Maryland. And I can't even remember now the famous quote or who said it, but it maybe it was Auden. Like, poems are about one thing, all poems, and that's love. Mm-hmm. And when you really start to pick that apart, you think, but wait a minute, this poem is about, a protest poem about, discrimination, or this poem is about the grief I felt when my brother died, or this poem is about, well, all of that can be linked back to one form of love or another, right? Love is the impetus, and in this case it's an expression of, that love that I felt as a child so freely and fully and openly, and wanting as an adult to remind myself, do that, feel that, spread that around, right?
Very nice, yes.
Right?
Please continue sharing. I want to hear your voice. Please continue sharing.
All right. Let's stay in the kitchen, shall we? Let's go back. Let's go back to the kitchen.
Yeah, all right.
Let's go back to the kitchen. This poem is called "Fixing Thelma's Hair." My maternal grandmother's name was Thelma, and she was a teenager in the 20s. She grew up on a farm in the panhandle of Texas, poor, but enough to eat, 14 children working on the farm with their parents. And she took a train trip when she was 17 or 19 to visit her Aunt Minnie in Arlington, Virginia, up here. They had, they had folks up here. She took the train. Big deal, right? Big deal in 1921. Huge deal. And so this poem is about a memory I have of many, many times standing in the kitchen in our home place. I helped her wash her hair. This is when she was elderly. Helped her wash her hair in the kitchen sink. And then I would help her fix her hair, and she'd tell me stories. So this is a poem called Fixing Thelma's Hair. Her hair thin enough to show her gray-white scalp. The skin of her neck soft as a young girl's. She holds the bag of plastic curlers in her lap. I stand behind the chair and comb out the tangles from her kitchen sink shampoo. Her toes pump up and down like pistons. We're alone in a breeze ruffling the window by the fridge. I begin the first row from forehead to crown, each curler rolled toward me and held down tight, snapped into place with green plastic. The neat lines, the damp hair pulled straight between my fingers, the rhythm and order, they comfort me. The blur of her constant talk is a radio left on for company. I interrupt to tease about all her boyfriends, how she's been stepping out to paint the town, dancing in her red dress. She giggles, then sighs, "Oh, honey, I can't hardly even walk, my hip's getting so bad." Passes me another curler over her shoulder. When the last one's in place, we sit at the table and sip iced tea and try the bourbon balls she's made, little cookies like a shot of whiskey. I like the intimacy of a woman in curlers, swollen feet in old cracked mules tapping the tiles. She tells me the story, the prickly halo of her head nodding, how she dared to get a bob in the summer of 1921 on a visit to Aunt Minnie in Arlington. How she cut off all her fine, long, white blonde hair, and when she got home to Shamrock, Texas, her mother vowed never to speak to her sister again, and Granddaddy Riley went out to the shed to get drunk. Pretty soon, all 6 of her sisters followed suit. She's a tough one. Energy springing from her like the tight curls off the rollers as I comb her out. Before I shape the hair and spray its familiar pattern, I run my fingers through the Miss Clairol gold and feel the fragile bowl of her skull. It won't be long before she lays it down. That's fixing Thelma's hair in the kitchen. So the garden, shall I continue, Michael?
Yes, please.
Yes. So the garden is another space, as you've already seen, that I spend a lot of time in my poetry. And there's a poem in the book dedicated to my eldest sister, Terry. We have 11 years between us. I've always looked up to her. She's always been another hero and a friend to me. And this poem is called I Watch My Sister Harvest Lavender. And in this case, we're sitting in my sister's garden on a summer day, maybe in June. And as I watch her cut the lavender, I'm kind of transported back in my mind to memories throughout my life and what she taught me and how I looked up to her. And there's kind of a life lesson that emerges from the watching and the remembering. I watch my sister harvest lavender for Terry. She sits at the edge of the porch, curved over the plants, her bare feet on the cool grass, the hot sun shining on her shoulders, the curling brown of her hair, her cheekbones finely angled as a deer's. She stops to sip her coffee, her garden spreading around her, the daylilies raising their skirts to the sky. Suddenly, I see her as if I were again 6 and she 17, that kind of hero worship. I watch her through the white-hot blanket of light, a camera's flash, and all the images of the past transposed pentimento. The lavender is thick with bees. She gathers a few stems in her left hand, snips with her right. The bees circle the blossoms, rise and fall all around her. The gray boards of the hot porch beneath me, a watery wind in the trees. She scatters the stems in her large brown basket and takes another sip of coffee. She turns to me and laughs, tells me she's lucky. I think, you taught me how to swim. You walked with me across a snow-crusted field. Your body swayed before me, shaping into a woman's. You cupped a wildflower in your palm and gave me its name. She turns back to her task, this morning's prayer, and her hands move through the purple blue, the yellow black. She explains how she leaves some, in part for the bees, in part for herself, until new buds grow and fill out with flowers once more. She leans into the light. The light leads me to her hands, and her hands teach me how to harvest despite the danger, the necessary chance of a sting. That's I watch my sister harvest lavender for my sister Terry. I might need a pause to take a sip of water, Michael.
Yes, that's fantastic. This is a perfect time to do it. Everyone, we'll be right back. We are back. Again, my name is Michael Anthony Ingram. I am here with Kim Parsons. Kim, did you have an opportunity to drink some water? Some cool water?
I did. I had a lovely sip of water. Thank you, Michael.
Okay. All right.
Cool glass of water.
Here's a question for you, my friend. And I ask this a lot of my guests. Does it hurt you to write poetry? If not, why not? Because you write about some hidden things.
Is the process sometimes painful? Is that what you mean?
That is the question, yes.
Yeah, is the process sometimes painful? Yes, the process is sometimes painful. But painful in the way that healing can sometimes be painful, you know? An analogy that comes to my mind is, that feeling you get the day after you've really worked your muscles at the gym, mm-hmm. and you go to do some regular movements and you think, wow, that's kind of sore in there, in my arm or in my shoulder or in my hamstring or whatever, because you've just worked a muscle to its benefit, but it's letting you know that it's been worked, right? And so I think I think there are poems that I write that are asking. The process is really asking me to work through pain and come out the other side. Now, sometimes the pain is very personal. And many of the poems in this collection, I am very comfortable with just saying they come right out of my life. These are honest expressions directly from my life experience. My memories, my loves, my losses, my pains, my hopes, my dreams, my imaginings. But I also do, and I'm working on some new poems that they're still coming out of me, but I'm responding to in one series of poems I'm working on now. I'm responding to things that are happening in the world that I just cannot believe how disastrous and tragic they are. And I'm trying to work through my feelings about them and make a statement about them. And there's also a series of poems in which I'm going back and thinking about my ancestors and the very mixed and complicated history of my ancestors and how to work through the pains and truths and beauties and, and every flavor in between of that heritage. And, so, yeah, that can be painful, but I think it's a good kind of pain. Okay. Do you know what I mean by that? Like, I think it's cathartic. Yeah.
So if I asked you, is a poem letting your guard down or building a wall, how would you answer that?
Oh, I think for me, a poem opens my heart, softens me. At the same time, it strengthens me and builds up my resiliency. It is definitely, I cannot say strongly enough that the act of writing is a desire to move forward and through and carry on.
Right. Yes.
Not build up defenses, but to open and make connections.
Very nice. I agree. The very last question in this set. I'd like you to tell me about a poem that you did not include in the book because you were potentially afraid of it being misinterpreted.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know that I have one that fits that quite exactly. Afraid of it being misinterpreted. I'm really thinking, and I don't really have that fear, to be honest with you. Nice. I just don't have that fear. I think that there were poems I was writing near the end of the process of putting the manuscript. They were coinciding with the time period that I was putting the manuscript together. And I said to myself, this is not the home for this poem. And it wasn't because I was fearful of how people would take it. I just felt like it belonged in a home that didn't exist yet. My next book or some other project. It just didn't fit. But no, I don't really have that fear. I think I've gotten to it. There's one benefit of getting older. You care less about that stuff. You just, at least for me, I'm like, hey, if you don't like poetry, you don't have to read this, or if you don't like this subject matter, there's plenty of other poets doing amazing things with other subject matter. I am just one little voice, So I just don't really worry about that. That's the honest truth.
All right. To me, you're one great voice. And I'd like you to continue sharing.
Oh, you're so kind. You're so kind. Michael, you are so kind. I can't thank you enough, for your support and encouragement about the book. I mean, it means the world to me. And your work has inspired me so much, really. And the way you read your work is so inspiring.
Okay, back on you now. Back on you. Please share some more poems. All right.
Would you like to hear some more poems?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think it might be fun. I'm going to read, I mean, it sounds kind of crazy that this is fun, but this poem, it pretends to be about something else. Okay? This is a poem this is one of those things where I think it's kind of like you can tell what I learned as I wrote it. So this poem is called Why I Couldn't Stay in the Midwest Any Longer. And I went out. I'm from Baltimore. I grew up in the Mid-Atlantic, traveled up and down the East Coast, but then went to grad school in Nebraska, and had never really spent any time in the Midwest until then. And it's very different. Baltimore is a very friendly city. People will just start talking to you while you're waiting for the bus. Okay, people will tell you their favorite thing to cook for Thanksgiving dinner while you're waiting in the checkout line at the grocery store. I mean, people are they're just wide open in Baltimore. That's how I grew up. Friendly, talking to anybody. And it's not like that in the Midwest. And so this poem started off to be sort of a tongue-in-cheek poking at like the kind, quiet culture of the Midwest that I couldn't stay there. Also about the weather, which is very extreme. I would be walking up the street in Nebraska, and there'd be like this wind coming all the way from Canada, and my eyelashes would freeze. I mean, wow. And then in the summer it would be like 108 degrees and hail. So the poem is kind of poking fun at the Midwest, but then you realize by the end it's about something else. So, why I couldn't stay in the Midwest any longer. 8 years in the center of the endless plains, wading through snowdrifts in October, plodding into a north wind, ice on my eyelashes, waiting and waiting and waiting for a spring that lasted 1 week, then fanning myself in front of a rickety window unit in a rented flat, watching hail the size of gumballs ping off windshields, walking wide, planned streets, eastern trees placed to shade boulevards and American craftsman houses, but with leaves that never quite changed color, just dropped to the sidewalk, worn out and blanched by September. I missed Baltimore, its familiar cramped corners, Little Italy, the delis, Germantown, Greek town, the muddy Patapsco, the putrid water of the harbor, the smell of McCormick's spice. So I dragged my sorry muffler across 1,200 miles, one elbow out the window, burning in the June sun, and almost stopped the car to kiss the ground when I hit familiar rolling hills. An old back road we cruised, FM radio blaring, woozy from Boone's Farm and too much flirtation. Never could get used to being too far from big water. The choppy, briny bay, gulls on the cobblestones, diners and spicy seafood. And it didn't feel right. Everyone looking alike, chronically polite. No one ever suddenly chatting you up about their mom's best crab soup recipe while picking out produce at the IGA. Just sitcom faces. I guess that's a bit harsh. And folks were so nice. But I felt loud with strangers there, among the subdued. Longed to whoop and holler and jump up to dance like hallelujah when a band kicked on at a Friday Fells Point bar. But the real reason I couldn't stay was my jigsaw puzzle heart, fallen, slipped out the side of an old wooden crate, unnoticed, side split, scattered down the curb. I figured if I went where my feet fit the contours of the ground, then maybe I could sort the pieces under the glow of the domino sugar sign down by the water. Find my shape again in the eyes of friends. They'd buy me a drink and not mind my crying into it until I didn't need to anymore. That's why I couldn't stay in the Midwest any longer, a.k.a. the heart-sick, heart-broke blues.
Right. You put it out there. You put it out
what? Everybody's had their heart broke sometime, somewhere, somehow, right?
And you don't feel that poem could have been misinterpreted. Okay. Okay.
Well, no, I don't. It's really funny. I think when you get to the end, you realize, the speaker is saying, oh, that's a lot of hoo-ha. I was just heartbroken. You can poke fun at any place.
That's true.
You can poke fun at any place. So, in contrast to that, as I have been very, very fortunate. Later in my life, I found my husband. He found me, and I found him. He's my best friend. He's my life's companion. He's a wonderful, kind, and good guy with a generous heart. And one of the things I've learned in our marriage is that love becomes a kind of steady presence in your life. It is such a gift to just be a steady constant in your life, and to not be on, heartbroken, and to not be on a roller coaster ride, to just, have that steady presence. And there's a saying, that true love isn't about staring into each other's eyes. It's about both looking in the same direction.
Oh, wow.
And this is a poem about that. It's a poem about actually sort of some of the technical aspects of rainbows. We think of rainbows as these like sort of cartoon things, that little children draw or, that are like, on cartoons, but really they're actual phenomena, that are caused by water and light and refraction and all these things. And so this poem kind of, we live in a valley alongside Shenandoah National Park, and we have spectacular sky because the weather moves over the valley in various ways. And one of the ways is it's not uncommon for summer storms to come over the mountain, pass over, and the sun comes behind it. And we have spectacular rainbows. And this poem kind of rose out of that experience and took me a long time to write. So anyway, I'll shut up and read the poem. If our eyes were able, we would find the sky. And it begins with a quote from Epicurus of Samos, who was one of the earliest studiers of rainbows. From the reflection of this light, the air all around will be colored as we see it to be, as the sun shines upon its parts. Even though we both stand on the porch and trace the double curve over the valley, we don't see the same rainbows. Waves of light pass through drops of water and break open along a single line of sight. Tree swallows swoop over the meadow, and 2 rabbits step onto the lawn from the tall grass. The first bow bends across a plane of air. Then the second appears, then disappears, now on this side, now on that. A magician's trick of red to violet, violet to red. Now you see it, now you don't. The deeper blue between the two is a trap door holding in the light, which enters but can't return. Alexander's dark band. He explained it first in the year 200. Imagine taking time to stop and ponder rain. Some accident of light, the optics of possibility and limit. Something breaks each of us open eventually, try as we might. It's not easy to reveal our own surprising set of parts. The way a page in a book cracks open the world's colors, or the first time I met your face, shining like an old friend stepping off a train, igniting a thundercloud in my chest. A double rainbow is gift enough. Soon the rain and clouds move away to the east. Centuries later, Felix Belay saw 19 bows in his light chamber. If our eyes were able, he said, we would find the sky filled with arcs, arcs crossing wider arcs, almost into infinity. A rose of rainbows, he called it. Perhaps when one body passes through another, it leaves a trail in the sky of memory, like the shadow of the mountain walking across the valley, the familiar space which tracks between us, the swallows on the birdhouse, the rabbits grazing in tandem. The rainbow is not located in the sky. It travels in waves to our eyes. That's the poem. If our eyes were able, we would find the sky. And that's about my steady, loving husband. You know, I think we're close to the end of our time, aren't we, Michael?
Actually, no. I said it so that we could go a little over. So we're fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Well, I have a poem. I have a poem from the book that I'd like to read, and maybe one or two new ones that I'm working on, thinking ahead to my next project. Do we have time for that?
Yes, we do. Take your time.
Wonderful.
No problem.
The last poem I'm going to read from the book kind of goes back to the theme we talked about earlier, which is, you know, working through and moving on.
Mm-hmm.
And we're better off if we do it. And we're better off if we forgive and let go. So this is a poem that is an expression of forgiveness, and it can be read different ways, I think. It can be read as a blessing on the self. It can be read as a blessing on a past love, someone who's hurt you, and who you need to forgive. So the poem is called A Blessing. And the only thing I think you might help you get more out of it is to know that a flower is featured in this poem, a moonflower. A moonflower is an actual flower, kind of like a morning glory. It's in that family. Morning glories are interesting because they open in the morning and they only stay open for a few hours and then they close. And that's where they get their name. But a moonflower opens in the evening and stays open until the sun's heat closes it in the morning. So, and they open very dramatically. Sometimes you can actually watch them open very slowly, and they, have a intense, bright, white, round shape when they're fully extended. So that might help sort of picture what's happening in the poem. Okay, here we go. A blessing. You sit on your front porch some evening alone or holding the hand of someone you love, or not holding it, nor your breath, nor your stiff neck of work. Your mind slowly opens with the drifting down of dusk. Little twitches of the calendar pass through your arms and legs. Let them. They can't dance you back into dailiness. Even the flashes of pain once inflicted you brush off as you do the mosquitoes. These steal small portions of your blood. Don't give them more. And while you wander over yourself and settle into the shadows, the moonflower on the vine, twining up the porch rail, slowly opens. So slowly you don't turn your head. You do not drag the heavy tail of him behind you anymore. You have lifted him in your arms and turned him over and known his human shape once again. When you set him down, he walked away. Turn now. Feel some presence at your back. See the full circle of the blossom. And though momentary, how it glows, how its purity washes over you, its scent, a sacred open space. And that's the poem, A Blessing.
Well, before you continue, I want to ask, this is a question for the people in the back, those that feel voiceless. And the question is about your book, Mayapple Forest. What does your book reveal about being human?
Golly, I really hope the book is about very fundamental human experiences of love, of loss, of the grieving process, of trying again, of getting up and facing another day, forgiving and moving on, and accepting, accepting that dichotomy that is always with us of pain and joy, love and loss. I think that the book just wants to be about those really basic human emotional experiences. And if I had to say one more dimension that I really hope comes across, it would be that the natural world is a great teacher and a great healer. It loves us if we let it, and we need to love it back. And we need to respect it and give it time and space in our lives. So I think that's as succinct as I can be about that.
Beautifully stated. Beautifully stated. Thank you. And the people in the back, they heard you.
Oh, well, go take a walk, people in the back. Go take a walk. Mm-hmm. We were joking around before the show started, Michael, that you don't take a train to the Mayapple Forest. You put on your boots, you put on your walking shoes, and you go walking.
You go walking.
And you listen, and you look around. Though there are so many gifts in the natural world to help us. It doesn't matter where you live. It could just be to listen to the bird that is roosting on the windowsill of your apartment building. You know, the natural world has a lot to teach us and to give us, I think.
But Kim, it takes a conscious effort to do that, to pay attention to the things around us. Got to practice.
Yeah, and be open to the gifts of them, right? You know, to take time and to be open to the gifts of that. We are bombarded with stuff constantly in this world, and we really are. I mean, just think of this in these last 2 weeks, the amount of grief we've witnessed here in my state of Virginia. There's been two mass shootings.
Wow.
And one out among some young men who knows what the motivation was near the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, and one at a Walmart on the eastern shore of Virginia. And it's just day in and day out, this violence, you know, it's enough, and every other, you know, every other ill of the modern world. But you know, I think I mentioned earlier that I've been writing in some of my newest work. I've been responding to, I guess you could just generally call them current events, and trying to use poetry as a way to wrestle with them, and I guess make a statement about them. Although I don't always know what that's going to be, you know, because I start writing, and as I said, I try to sort of be open to the discovery. Where is the poem going to go? You know, what am I going to learn? What am I going to learn by writing the poem? So if it's all right with you, I'd like to share a couple of, well, you know, let me share this one. This is not in the book. This is a newer piece. The title is, I Can't Write a Poem with a Gun.
Oh, powerful title.
I can't write a poem with a gun. I can't pick berries with a gun, can't protect my fingers from thorns, or carry the fruit back, or stir in sugar and spice. I can't mix pastry with a gun, or roll it out, or bake it, or lift its sweetness to your tongue. I can't plant seeds with a gun, can't measure the furrow, or lay each one in its inch of ground. I can't hoe any rows with a gun, or lug the weeds to the compost heap, or turn the steaming piles, or sift the new soil, or spread it around the tender shoots. I can't chop fresh greens with a gun, can't slice onions or grate garlic or soak dried beans or stir the pot. I can't set the table with a gun or arrange flowers or light a candle or blow out the smoking match or pull out your chair. A gun won't help me to listen to your story, to see the falling images as words ricochet around us. A gun won't open my heart to your pain, or help me to extinguish it, or place my hand on your quaking shoulder, or wash away any blood. I can't make a soft bed with a gun, or tuck a gun around me for warmth, or wrap arms around my beloved, or kiss a cheek, or stroke the cat, or stretch when I wake, or smell the morning. I can't brew coffee with a gun or tie the stiff laces of my muddy boots. When a fox steps lightly into the yard and shakes off the dew from the meadow and cocks her head, nose quivering, a gun will not help me to study her, how she seems to consider so intently which way to turn, how so much might depend upon her choice, where to next in this fraught, this tantalizing world. That poem is called I Can't Write a Poem with a Gun.
Wow. That one truly packs a punch. Kim, let me ask you this. Do you think poets have an obligation to write about issues that had direct effect on our world, or can poems just be about birds or trees? What do you think?
Well, sometimes that kind of a question frustrates me because for me, the birds and the trees are as much a part of the world as you and I, and they're suffering terribly by many of our decisions. And many of them as a species have been around longer than humans. And so I don't really feel like there is I don't really feel like those are separate topics for me. Okay. For me personally, they're all interrelated. And that, I can learn about, the fox, to me it's all interconnected, Michael.
All right. Here we go. Or can poems just be about rocks?
Well, I write about rocks too. I think poems are, the best poems. That's so funny. It's so funny, but it's true. Crazily enough. I think the best poems are about many things all at once.
All right. Mm-hmm.
And so in that poem, it's clear that the speaker of that poem, and, let's pretend it's not me, and let's just step back and look at it. The speaker of the last poem, the speaker of the poem talking about looking at rainbows and trying to understand the science of that and, get your head around the marvel of that, right? These are speakers who are looking out at the world and trying to make some sort of sense out of it, and it's clear that they sift a lot of things through their love of the natural world. It's just clear that that's how it works. And it also, in the case of the second poem, their love of cooking and gardening and, being in nature and being outdoors. And so, yes, the poem is about is a protest against how we've allowed guns to proliferate in our culture and the cost that that has taken on us. But the poem is also offering alternatives throughout the whole poem, ways to be in the world that have nothing to do with that. And so, I don't know. I think poems can be about many things. I think that the lessons of poems can apply at many levels to many things. And I hope that, my poetry is elastic that way, and layered that way. That's my goal.
Well,
so even if it's
Well, I want to thank you for being honest with your opinion about that question that I asked, how it's potentially a frustrating question. Because I didn't really think, as I say again, it's going to take practice to focus on the interconnectedness of the birds and the trees and these other things in the world.
Yeah.
And I decided that I will not ask that question again.
Oh, no. I think it's kind of interesting to explore it from all sides because, I would argue that if you're in a culture that thinks it's great for there to be like 7 million handguns everywhere, there's probably some insights there about it's okay to like throw your trash in the river. It's okay to, pollute the air. Because these are all destructive behaviors, right? They're all ways of being in the world that don't take into account the value of other beings and their integrity and their autonomy, really, from you. You're just like, it's okay for me to just slash and burn my way through the world because I'm an all-powerful human. And I think if that is your philosophy, then it's going to show up at many levels in your life and in your choices. So, I think it's going to show, So it's a deep subject.
It is. We only have about 10 minutes to go. We've got time for one more poem. One more.
Well, maybe it would be fun. Maybe it would be fun to just come back to love, huh, Michael?
All right. I like that.
How about if we just come back to love? Last winter I wrote this poem in response to a 5-word challenge in another group that I belong to, Lime Square Poets, which is an Irish poetry writing community. It's really fantastic. And I just want to say before we close that, poetic community has been hugely important to me over the last few years, and I wouldn't have written this book without it. The inspiration, the joy, the sharing, the energy that it gives me to be in community with other writers, to hear what they're doing, to hear what they care about, to learn from them, to be inspired by them. It's just a tremendous gift. And so this poem, is kind of lighthearted in a way. It's also serious in a way because it is about that idea that as you get older, as you've been married for a long time, love evolves and changes. It's not that romantic wild fling of the first months that you dated and courted and sparked, It becomes something else. And it grows and evolves over time. And so this is a poem called A Winter Fairy Tale. And it's a love poem to my husband, Doug.
Very nice.
A Winter Fairy Tale. Hoarfrost blooms at my temples, hooks around my ears, a cold wind's knocking. My body's forgetting the steamy hydraulics of those nights, the lick of eyeliner, the shimmy and the sweat, the torrent from the amps, the sassy flip of curls on my shoulders, how a hungry mouth surfaced near mine, how I could slide into a drowning kiss. This December night, I'm warming myself at the fire you've built. I'm watching embers glow like remembered sighs. Husband of mine, let's turn a slow shuffle about the flickering room. Let's mingle our old pajamas and worn-out scuffs. Let's stoke the laughter at ourselves, but tenderly. Let my fingers linger for a while in the silky sparks of your silver-threaded hair. That's a winter fairy tale for my husband, Doug.
Beautiful. Kim, my last official question.
Yes, sir.
How would you classify your ability to write poetry as a creative gift or a creative art?
Gosh, I think it's a practice, I think it's I think it's a discipline. I think that if you don't have an affinity for language and the music of language and playing around with words and sitting quietly by yourself and, staring at the page until blood forms on your forehead, if those things aren't like happy activities for you, then you're probably not going to do it. So there has to be like an instinct for it, or if you want to call that a gift, okay, or like that's your skill set or that's your jam,
Yes.
But beyond that, I think you have to practice. You have to do it and keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. And I would say not only do you have to practice doing it I mean writing it, but I think you need to practice listening, reading it, thinking about it, thinking about how someone created something, when you admire their poem or you're moved by their poem, taking time to go back and saying, now how did they do that? How did they take me there? And so, I would say maybe, we all have things that, we're kind of, we use that phrase, we're in our element when we're doing it. Mm-hmm. It like suits us, and maybe that's where the gift part comes in. But I think it's a practice.
Where can listeners find your work?
Well, I hope that they have enjoyed hearing some of these little pieces from the book. The Mayapple Forest is published by Terrapin Books, and you can visit their website at www.terrapinbooks.com, and it's available through major vendors like, Barnes & Noble or your the great big vendor Amazon, which some people are not fond of but find it convenient. It is available through distributors, so if you like to go to small bookstores in your neighborhood or in your town, you can go and ask for it, and they can order it. It's available that way. And I hope that some folks feel inspired to read the poems.
How can listeners stay in touch?
My website is up and running, has been for some time. You can visit me. It's simply www.kimportsparsons.com. And I help every week. Well, it's 3 Sundays a month in Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. Our programs are available through our Facebook group, and they're recorded and shared on our YouTube channel. And I love to be in community with all the many, many poets, featured, open mic, and special guests who have and continue to participate and will participate on Cultivating Voices 3 Sundays a month. First Sunday of the month is a themed open mic, and we announce those themes in advance, and people bring their work to share and sign up to read. And the second Sunday of the month is a new book showcase where we feature new books that are coming out. And the third Sunday of the month is what we call our wild card open mic, where people can sign up to read anything that's on their mind that they'd like to share at that time.
Well, here's my last one. What's next for you creatively? I know you said you plan to work
I'm going to keep writing. I shared a little bit about, poems like the one I read, where I'm working through things that are happening, I guess, in current events in our world and trying to make sense of them in poems. And I'm also working through a series of poems that kind of investigate the history of my own ancestors in the U.S. and
yes.
It's complicated, and there's many facets to it, and that is rich material. So it takes whatever time it takes, but I'm writing,
Mm-hmm.
I'm listening, I'm sharing. Being in community is the most important part to me, Michael.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you, Kim, for a wonderful hour of poetry. Your work is fascinating. It's sublime. Hopefully there's an audio book somewhere in the future. You've got the voice there. You really
I want to thank you. You're just the most wonderful, warm, and generous host, and you make it. I feel so at ease. You're just so kind and supportive, Michael. Really, thank you.
Oh yes. Well, everyone, Mayapple Forest, everybody. Mayapple Forest. Start that line of 1,000 people in front of a Barnes and Noble. Start that line.
Take a little walk in and see what you find, right?
Right.
Take a little walk in the woods and see what you find.
Well, thank you, Kim, again. And to the listening audience, as I share with you every week, that poetry rings somewhere throughout the land. Good night, everybody. Good night, Kim.
Good night.
Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio, is available on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. You can also check out the website at QLPOR.com.